So here we are in our task list.component.ts, and what we want to do is we want to create a class only for the purpose of creating a new task. So let's call a class, or let's create a class, let's call it new task. So only for the purpose of creating a new task we will create that class, and inside here we have a constructor. So let's create a constructor, and that one has a field public title of data type string, and the initial value is an empty string, and a public date of data type date, and the initial value is a new date, which is for sure then today whenever you create it, right? Now a constructor for sure has some sort of curly braces. Let me just bring that into the next line of code so that it's easier for you to read. Awesome. Okay, so this is the constructor. Can leave it like that, that's fine. And now we will use that class new task. So scroll up until you come really to the class task list component, and here we got new task title, right? And instead of, well, only using the title, we switch it over to new task, set it of type new task, and initialize it with the value new task. So this is a common behavior what you want to do in Angular. So only for the purpose of creating something new, you can go ahead and create a class like new task, right? And then create a constructor for that. And here we got the field. So right now, or in the older version of the application, we just had the title, but now we also have a date. So it's a complex or a more complex object, right? So this is why we now have that new task. Now for sure we have some reference errors, so let's scroll down and you can see that we for sure cannot use the new task title anymore, but we can use the new task dot title, right? Because that's what we created in the constructor below. Got that right here as a field. The same for sure we need to apply in the HTML, because also here we have a reference error. Let me just scroll a little bit to the right. You can see ng model new task title. We also want to do that new task dot title. There we go. And the compiler error that we have here is because of the naming conflict between the new task reference and the new task field in our component. So what I mean by that is here we got the new task field, right? And you can see the input that we got right here also has a local reference with the same name. So let's rename the new task here, the local reference, to new task ng model. Awesome. And now you can see that if we scroll to the right, the new task title is now working, but for sure we need to adjust all of the reference here. And I mean, those are just like a couple of them, so it's fine if we just do it manually. Awesome, new task ng model dirty. There we go. Okay, so now we fixed both issues. You can see we are compiling successfully. Now we can switch over to component.ts and even remove the date right here. So we also got a date inside of our new task, right? So date. We don't have to use those single fields here because we now have that new task. Okay, so let's fix the issue in ng on init. What we want to do is var string date equals to, let's just grab the value from the route again. There we go, snapshot date. And now we set this, not this date, but this dot new task. So we change that field here, this dot new task equals to new task. So we use the constructor this dot new task dot title, so whatever the title already is, and then new date, and we pass in the string date from the parameter route. Let's just scroll down right until we come to the add method, because we for sure have to change that now. So the task ng form reset and set the date to this dot new task dot date. Switch over to HTML and let's go to the date picker, so to the input field that we have right here. Let's scroll to the right. Let's not bind it to date anymore, but to new task dot date. I guess you can tell what we are doing here, right? So we previously just bound everything to a field right, directly in TypeScript class. That's easy. And now instead of using a field, we use like a more complex field, so a class, for example, and inside of that class we again for sure have fields. So this is why we now use new task.date, because here we don't have date anymore, but we only have new task.date. Now, in order of refactoring, let's move the task class that we got right here. Let me just scroll down in TypeScript here, class task. Let's move that into a completely separate file. So let's just right click on that, click on refactor and select move to a new file. Now on the left side, you can see task.ts. Let's exactly do the same stuff with a new task. So right click, refactor, move to a new file. On the left side, you can see new task.ts and task.ts. Now when we switch back to task list.component and you scroll up, you can now see those referencing import statements here, right? So new task from .new task and task from .task. So those automatically now are getting imported. So don't forget that you have to do that in TypeScript, right? Okay, so next up we will work on services, and for that we need to prepare we need to do some more refactoring so that everything in the end is really professional. So what we do here, our new task that we just created, let me just open it up. That's a so-called data transfer object, right? So this is a so-called DTO, data transfer object. But why? Why do we have to choose that name? Well, the HTML that we have right here, you can see new task, right? So we always use that new task. You can see that in the component, new task. And the only thing that this class is doing, it is transferring data from the form, so from the HTML into the TypeScript component. So it is transferring data. And this is why we call it a data transfer object, because it transfers data from the HTML to our TypeScript component. Now, let's go ahead and rename that file. So instead of calling it new task.ts, right click on it. Let's rename it. Let's call it new task.dto.ts. New task.dto.ts. You can see that now automatically the update or the import statements want to get updated. So let's do that. Always automatically update them. So if this is not occurring for you, you have to do it manually, but you can now see that the import statement here got changed to .newtask.dto. And now we do exactly the same thing with our tasks. So on the left side, task.ts, right click on that, rename it to task-item.dto.ts. So that's perfect. What we also want to do is we want to rename the entire class task to be right click, so select it and then rename symbol and name it task item. There we go. Perfect. So this is all preparation for our next topic. And the final thing that we have to do is we should rename the folder that we have here, task list, to tasks. So right click on that. Let's rename the folder, call it tasks. And again, if you get the prompt for updating the imports, always automatically update imports. Now the last thing that we have to refactor is we should rename the task list module. Let me just resize that to tasks module. So right click on task list module, hit rename, call it tasks or task.module. Then go into that file, so tasks module.ts, and we also want to do that with the name. So here export class task list module, right click, rename symbol, tasks module. Awesome. So let's just compile everything. And we got an issue in our app routing. So let's go into our app routing, change the folder name here. Let's just open up the terminal a little bit more so that we can see the compilation error. You can see in line 34, in line 4, you can see that cannot find module tasks list .task list. So let's just save that file here again and scroll down because it was just not saved and now it's compiled successfully. Okay, so it was just a mistake of not saving, but everything got updated nicely. So you should now see that everything is compiling. And as I said, we needed to do that so that we now can start using a service and that all of the files are named correctly. Just always keep in mind, every time you have like a class that just is for receiving data from the template to send it back to the TypeScript, for example, it's a DTO, a data transfer object.